Huma, Yahweh, Weaputsu Yeveka, Yanusa Misaneka Mifaneka. Arise of you, O Yahweh. Let your enemies be scattered, and let those that hate thee flee from before thee. Let all of Yasharah, Yisrael, who love, worship, and praise Yahweh, give him thanks by saying Hallelujah.
Shalom and welcome to Into All Truth. Shalom and welcome to Into All Truth. And we thank you for everyone who has donated. We thank you for everybody who picked up our calendar or Chaya Eat Life and Fast. Both are tools for Hebraic living and lifestyle. One is the Divine Order, approved foods, healthy foods. And of course the other is all the Moedim, the appointed times that help you to line up with Yah's divine order so that you can be alive and remain and enter into the kingdom, okay, and hear from him. Anyway, may the Ruach HaKodesh lead you into all truth and show you things to come. Hallelujah. May the seed of the word be planted in your heart and bring forth fruit unto righteousness in the name of Yahushua HaMashiach. Know of a surety that your descendants will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also that nation whom they shall serve I shall judge, and afterwards shall they come out with great possessions. And you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried in a good old age. But in the 4th generation they shall come here again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. They shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites, the Amorite Kens, has not yet been fulfilled. So we know that the land that is ruling the earth, where Israel and Judah in particular is captive, is the hammer of the whole earth. And Israel will come out of that land to return to their homeland. How do we know this? Many of us are well aware that there was no 430-year Egyptian captivity. According to Scripture, the sojourning of the children of Israel, while they sojourned in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan, was 430 years. That's what the Septuagint says. So that included the land of Canaan, sojourning in the land of Canaan. Not just the land of Egypt. Canaan's a different son. And Canaan was in the actual land of Israel. Okay? That was the land of Israel, was called the land of Canaan. Now Galatians says the promise spoken to Abraham and his seed was that the law was confirmed because he already had it 430 years later. And it cannot disannul to make the promise of none effect. So the covenant was confirmed and the law restored in Israel 430 years after the promise to Abraham. So the sojourning in Egypt was not 430 years because we had Abraham, we had Isaac, and we had Jacob. And they lived at least 100 years each. So we know that it was about 193 years that Abraham and his family were in the land of Canaan. And they spent maybe a couple or several years in Egypt, all right? But it was about 193 years that they were in the land of Israel / Canaan. And then Joseph was maximum in Egypt 270 years, with 210 of those years being in bondage. And this is why Yah warns through Moses that there will be a second captivity to Egypt and a second Exodus. So Yahuwah says in Deuteronomy 28, Yahuwah will return you to Egypt in ships by a route that I said you should never see again. And there you will sell yourselves to your enemies as male and female slaves, but no one will redeem you. And we see this, as I spoke in the last Prester John video, that they were indentured servants. And we'll go into that as we go in the northern kingdom. Indentured servants that came on ships and then generationally went into chattel slavery. And that's why Jeremiah 23 says, "So behold, the days are coming, declares Yahuwah, when they will no longer say, as surely as the Most High lives, who brought the Israelites out of the land of Egypt. As surely as Yah lives, who brought and led the descendants of the house of Israel from the land of the north and from all four corners of the other countries to which I had banished them. And they will dwell once more in their own land." And more scriptures say, "in a city without walls, and no one will come up against them." So they won't be at war with anybody except for the war before the coming of Yahusha. "But in the fourth generation they shall come here again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet fulfilled." And so here the Amorites dwell carelessly. And this is the judgment that is coming on Babylon proper. That is the hammer of the whole earth, the leader of the whole earth. And that's America and Canada. What is said about Babylon? "You said, I will be queen forever. You did not take these things to heart or consider their outcomes. So now hear this, O lover of luxury, who sits securely, who says to herself, I am, and there is none besides me." Who says that but Ha-Satan? "I will never be a widow or know the loss of children. But two things will overtake you in a moment, in a single day, the loss of children and widowhood. And they will come upon you, full measure, in spite of your many sorceries and the potency of your spells. Give back to her as she has done to others. Pay her back double for what she has done. Mix her a double portion in her own cup." Okay, and this is the great city, clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. And that is America and even Canada. This is the second Exodus time, the second Exodus of Israel out of the final captivity, and the Gentiles will cling to Israel. So it is crucial to know the identity of Israel and the location of the land. Secondly, the true lands of every people group. Why? Because according to Matthew, as in the days of Noah were, so also shall the coming of the Son of Man be. Okay? What will be happening in these last days? Isaiah 13:13, "For the heavens shall be enraged, and the earth shall be shaken from her foundation because of the fierce anger of Yahuwah Sabaoth, the Lord of hosts, in the day when his wrath shall come on. And they that are left shall be as like a fleeing fawn, a stray sheep, and there shall be none to gather them, so that a man shall turn back to his own people, and a man shall flee to his own land." However, now the promise of Yah is that Yah is searching for his people, and he, with a mighty hand and a stretched out arm, will return them. And this is why the Gentiles will cling to Israel. So, but nonetheless, whatever choice you make, you got to return to your own land to be within the law. So you're in the house of Israel, or you return to your own land. Cut off the sower from Babylon. So it's a real land. It's a place where you sow seed. "And he that handleth the sickle in the time of harvest, for fear of the oppressing sword, that they shall turn every one to his people, and they shall flee every one to his own land." That means Babylon's going to be destroyed. There's no hiding in the mountains or sowing seed. And how the hammer of the whole earth, we know that America is the power of the whole earth, the military, is cut asunder and broken down. How is Babylon become a desolation among nations? It's going to be desolate here, so we got to get out. And that's everyone, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And even the Amorites and Canaanites. And for the work of Yahuwah is in the land of the Chaldeans. But now it is the land of the Amorites. Come against her, and the Europeans, right? Japheth. "Come against her utmost border, open her storehouses, and cast her up as heaps, and destroy her utterly. Let nothing be left." That means there's nothing going to be left here. "Thus saith Yahuwah of hosts, the children of Israel and the children of Yehudah were oppressed together, and all that took them captives held them fast, and they refused to let them go." This is why we have the borders shorn up, right? "The sword is upon their horses and upon their chariots, and upon all the mingled people," the mixed multitude of Babylon, right? Different nations. And they shall become as a woman when a sword is thrust upon her treasures, and they shall be robbed. So the destruction of Babylon is imminent, and anybody who believes in the Savior and our Creator has got to get out. The land of Shem. So welcome, Mishpachah. We're about to get into the description of the land of Shem according to Scripture, the sun, the moon, and the stars. Because Yah says he calls heaven and earth to witness. We're also going to use historical books and maps, but of course we know the word of Yah is supreme, and the witness of his creation also is. So let's get into it. This is about the land of Shem, and of course that includes all of the continent of Africa, going all the way to Western Europe, Britain, Spain, Germany, as well as South America, part of South America, and then what they call the Middle East, all the way to India. So we're going to start with Africa, because Africa is the promised land. First thing we need to do is look at the name of the land and how it relates to Scripture. And so Strong's H211 is the word for Africa. And of course, it's different from Pharaoh, Afra. Okay, we're going to go back into that in a second. But the land itself is named for the leader and for the soil out of which man was created. Okay, the red soil. All right. So when we look at Asiatic researches, for those who are historians, it says Ephraim or Apharia are regular derivative forms of Aphara, and from them is obviously derived Iberia, the ancient name of western parts of Europe, including Gaul and Spain. Homer uses in that sense the appellations of Hyperia and Apharia. So we're going to get a sense that this is both the northern and southern kingdom from this word, okay? Because Ephraim was what? One of the sons of Joseph, and he ruled over the northern kingdom. So you're talking about Iberia. Now, we're going to go more into the northern kingdom in our second part of the series, but right now we're focusing on geography and the land of Africa proper as Israel, okay? 1 Kings 9:28, it says, and they came to Ophir and fetched from thence gold 420 talents and brought it to King Solomon. So this is where they went for gold, to acquire it and bring it to King Solomon. And they pronounce it as Ophir, because Ophir is like light or gold, okay? And so the name is coming from Ophir or Ophir, referring to the leader, gold, light, precious things. Precious things. Okay, so when we look at Strong's H211, it says, Ophir, a very celebrated region abounding in gold. The sailors of Solomon went thither together with the Phoenicians from the very ports of the Atlantic Gulf, and brought thence every 3 years gold, precious stones, and sandalwood. Now this refers to a couple of places. It refers to both here, a land or city in southern Arabia in Solomon's trade route, where gold evidently was traded for goods, characteristic of fine gold. Now also in South America, there is a lot of gold, and half of that land is Shem's land. Okay, we'll get, we're doing the geography in a second. But yes, half of that land is Shem's land. And so gold was also acquired from there. And so when we look at the meaning of this, we have the Aleph, who is the leader. We have the Ah, or the Va, or the Wa. So the Gentiles will pronounce it with a hard V. There's no hard consonants in Hebrew because it's an open, breathing, always life-creating language. So you hear it in the patois, and when Africans, Bantu speak, it's always breath and open and awe. So it's awe, not V. And then this is the Pei for the panim, the face, and this is the Yod for the right hand, And this is the R for the Resh, the head. So this is telling you that who this is all about. This is the head leader who's secured with awe to the face of Yahuwah. So this is the leader secured to the face and the mouth and the word of the right hand of the head, the son or the leader. So this is leader. Everything is about the leader, which takes hold of the righteous leader, okay, by the right hand. So this is what Ophir means, Africa. It also means reducing to ashes. So what happened to Israel? Scattered to the four corners of the earth and reduced to ashes. But precious light, so ore is a word for light, and gold. So they are all of these things, and the land is also that. You see? Am I making sense? This is why the word says in Zephaniah, from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my suppliants, even the daughter of my dispersed, shall bring mine offering. So this is an offering who are people who are fine gold, precious jewels, items used for service in the temple, a nation of kings and priests. All right? And so it can also refer to the southern western lands of Shem. Now, of course, it's still the east because it doesn't sit below North America. It sits in the center of the earth. Okay? And so that is the meaning of the name of the land. Now, we compare this, as we've done before, to Afar, Pharaoh, and when Yahuwah instructed Moses to say to Aaron, stretch out thy rod and smite the dust of the land that it may become lice throughout all the land of Egypt, this word relates to the land of Egypt, Afar, the ayin of the face of the Resh. So this is Hasatan, the all-seeing eyes face leader. Spoken word of their leader. Okay? So this is his lying word. And so that is dry earth, dust, powder, ashes, mortar, rubbish, and sometimes ore. So they also have gold in their land. And they're also redeemed through Israel, through the marrying of so many women of Egypt into the line of Israel, right? They're redeemed. But they are first reduced to ashes, and so much of their land was destroyed because of sin. All right, so that's the difference between Africa and Afar. So here's another word for Africa. We've already gone into this. One of the sons of Midian, the son of Keturah and Abraham, his name was Epher. Strong's 6018. All right, and that is this Afara. So again, it's the awe. Again, the all-seeing eye, because we got some mixing going on here. Watchful eye over the word and leader. So there's more security in this name than just the all-seeing eye, okay? This is secured to the eye that is watching the face and word of the leader. All right? And so this is the same name that was given to the descendant of Judah, all right, from Ezra, right? He had a son named Epher, same name, Epher, and as well Manasseh, who is of the tribe of Israel, the half tribe of Joseph, Manasseh, that is one of the 144,000. Okay? All right, but they got all caught up in Baal Hermon. So that is a difference, all right? And that's why the land is named as such. Let's get into the history that we all know and we're all very familiar with. And there may be some of you who are new to this. And so I just encourage you to follow along. And we're going to talk about why the people of Israel would be from this particular land. And so let's start off with why the seed matters. Very often people believe that the seed matters when it refers to the people who everybody knows today to be Jewish. However, when we say, well, actually, no, they're grafted in. They accepted the identity. But this is who Israel truly is. Then people are like, oh, well, the seed doesn't really matter. We're all equal. We're all the same. But Romans 3:2 says, the question is, does the seed matter? And Romans answers the question very well, much in every way. The Yehudi had great advantages. He had greater light, more knowledge, better privileges, higher honors. The greatest advantage was that unto them were committed the oracles of Yahuwah, the holy scriptures, and hence the promises that were revealed in Yahushua HaMashiach. So unto Israel was committed the very holy scriptures, the oracles of Yah, and the Messiah came out of the line of Israel. And Israel are to be priests unto the earth. And we're seeing now that the whole counsel of the word of Yahuwah has not been being taught. And as Israel is awakening, it is finally being taught. But how can we identify Israel? Well, the book is a book of remembrance. It's Yah's love letter to Israel and to those of mankind who would be grafted in and live righteously. So you can identify the people of Israel by the book. It tells you who Israel is. And so I'm just going to go into this description briefly. A lot of people will be familiar. Whoever isn't familiar, here it is. What did Israel look like? Well, Song of Solomon talks about the Shunammite, the bride of Solomon, the only woman he seems to have loved, and she was also a caregiver to David. She was probably one of his wives. However, he was too sick to really have anything to do with her, so she was his bed warmer. And she was very much coveted by his sons after he passed away, and there was actually one of the sons was killed because he wanted her as the bride. And so this woman who was approved by David, and she was married to Solomon. And how is she described? She is described in the Psalm of Solomon as dark. My skin is dark like the tents of Kedar. My brothers made me keepers of the vineyard, but my own vineyard I have not kept. So according to the Jewish Encyclopedia, Kedar, one of the sons of Ishmael, likewise used for the Bedouins, whose characteristic traits are ascribed to Kedar, also known as Bene Kedar. Their tents, Bible numbers, their tents were made of black goat's hair. Kedar means dark in Hebrew. So the Encyclopedia Britannica shows us that Kedar is named second in each of two lists of Ishmael's sons. And here's the scriptures. Here are the sons of Ishmael. Dusky skin. So dusky can also mean black. All right. Dusky is another word for black. And his descendants were the Bedouins, and they are a black people. So let's look for the Bedouins. But the Old Testament contains no further information about him, and the name occurs 10 other times as a designation of an Arabian tribe. Okay? So because we know this is Ishmael and his sons, we know, and you can see in Jasher, that he married an Egyptian wife himself, and he himself was Egyptian. His mother, Hagar, was Egyptian. So Hagar was the daughter of the king of Egypt, and he preferred that she lived as a servant with Abraham than as, the offspring of a king, the concubine of a king in the kingdom of Egypt. So Ham means the people of the dark faces, the burnt faces. They are known to have very dark black skin. And so Hagar is the mother of Ishmael. And Ishmael also had Egyptian wives. Nubians in Egypt. Black skin. So when we talk about dark, my skin is dark, like the tents of Kedar, they were known for their black goats. It refers to tents made of black goat hair. And these are a dark-skinned people. Tents made from black goat's hair. You see, they're all very dark. See the Bedouin tents. Notice how dark they are? Kind of like Bugalafini. All right, so we're clear on that. So we said Ham means land of the burnt faces. All right, and Sheba, who was an Ethiopian, also had a child with Solomon. I went into that with my video on Ham, okay, and my video on Prester John. All right, and that's where you get the Phalashes from. Let's take a look at the Phalashes. So Phalasha are the northern Ethiopian highland population of Jewish belief. So they're not just of Jewish belief, they're actually genetically Israel. Not just belief. So Beta Israel, Jewish Phalashes of Ethiopia, descended from Dan, from Menelik, and Jews who fled Israel for Egypt after the destruction of the temple. Okay, and what do they look like? Okay, what color is their skin? Dark. And they have kinky hair. Okay, and a lot of them look like African Americans. West Indians. Now those are not them. Okay, this is a Phalasha. Okay, so here, Ham means hot. Collective name for Egyptians. Hot or heat. And of course, the Jewish Encyclopedia says that Ham was the father of what? The dark races. The dark races. So Sheba and Solomon had a child, and now Keturah, the second wife of Abraham, was also a Cushite. One of the reasons why we know this was because her sons were named their lands in the land of Shem, Sheba and Dedan. They settled in Sheba and Dedan. And Zipporah married Moses. Okay, Zipporah was the wife of Moses, and Jethro was a Midianite. So the sons of Keturah the Cushite and Abraham. So Keturah the Cushite and Abraham had 6 sons. One of them was named Midian, and Jethro was a Midianite. All right. Genesis 25:1. And again, Abraham took a wife. Her name was Keturah, and she bare him Zimran, Jokshan, Midan, and Midian, and Ishbak, and Shua. And so these are all their descendants. And all these were children. See, Epher is one, as in Africa, is a descendant of Midian. We already talked about that. That's where the word Africa comes from. All these were the children of Keturah. And Abraham gave all he had to Isaac, and unto the sons of the concubine which Abraham had, Abraham gave gifts and sent them away from Isaac his son, while he yet lived eastward unto the east country. Okay? So we see that Jokshan names two of his children, Sheba and Dedan. And these children have the same names as the descendants of Cush. So that's how we know. And these children have the same name as the descendants of Cush, Sheba and Dedan. So that is how we know that Keturah was a Cushite, because they're giving honor to the grandfather, Ham. All right, everything is done decently and in order in Scripture. Numbers 10:29, and Moses said unto Hobab the son of Regal, the Midianite, Moses' father-in-law, we are journeying unto the place which Yahuwah said, I will give to you. Come thou with us, and we will do thee good, for Yahuwah has spoken good concerning Israel. Okay? And also, there's even more intermarriage with Egyptian women. So far we have Abraham marrying Hagar, who is an Egyptian. We have him marrying the Cushite, Keturah, even though Hagar was the bondwoman. He wasn't really married to her. But the legitimate marriage was with Keturah after Sarah passed away, right? Moses, all right? And then we have now Joseph also says, and Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphaniah-Paneah, and he gave him to wife Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, the priest of On. And Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt. All right, Genesis 41:45 says, and Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zephaniah, and he gave him to wife Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. And Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt. All right, and she bore him a son. So where was he? In Egypt. What was her father? A priest of On. The root of On is Babel-On. So she was a Hamite, because the Hamites are dark people. And how do we know? Because what does Jeremiah 13:23 say? Can an Ethiopian change his skin, or a leopard his spots? Then may ye also do good that are accustomed to doing evil. In other words, an Ethiopian can't change his skin color. Black people can't change their skin color. It shows up somehow. Okay? And what's the real word for Ethiopian? The real word for Ethiopian is Cushi. It's referring to Cushite. See, Cushan, their blackness. They have black skin. Cushite, descendant of Cush. Okay? So we know the descendants of Ham are black. And of course, the word Nubian means black, black-skinned. And so with all these wives, right? All these wives who are descendants of people with burnt faces, right? How is the color, the skin color of these people not also black or dark? Dark, my skin is dark, like the tents of Kedar. Miriam and Aaron spoke against the Ethiopian woman whom Moses had married, for he had married an Ethiopian woman. So the Cushite woman, because she wasn't, not because she was black-skinned, but because she was not an Israelite. She was a Cushite, and they had just escaped captivity from the Hamites. All right? Spoke against the Ethiopian, the Cushite woman. And what was the punishment for this? Miriam was turned leprous white as snow. And Moses had to pray for her. Let her not be as one dead of whose flesh is half consumed when he comes out of his mother's womb. She had to remain outside the camp for 7 days. And then she was brought in again. So her skin wasn't white. Miriam's skin wasn't white. Miriam's skin was not white, was it? Because she turned leprous white. And what's the other? These are all very popular examples. I'm not showing you guys anything new because I've taught you so much throughout all the other studies. We've learned so much. But there's a lot of people who don't know this, right? So what does Yahuwah, our Elohim, tell Moshe to do? He says, put now thine hand in thy bosom. And he put his hand into his bosom. And when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous as snow. And said he, put thine hand into thy bosom again. And he put his hand into his bosom again and plucked it out of his bosom. And behold, it was turned again as his other flesh. So if you have white skin, if you're not brown skin and your hand turns white, nobody's going to really notice. However, if you have dark skin and you withdraw your hand from your bosom and it turns from black to white and white to black again, everyone's going to notice in a large court or assembly. However, if you already have white skin, it's not really something anyone's going to notice. And that's why I don't remember seeing it in the Charlton Heston movie. It doesn't really stand out. All right, and then of course the Apostle Paul, Acts 21:38, is described as what? An Egyptian. Art thou not that Egyptian which before these days made an uproar and led us out into the wilderness 4,000 men that were murderers? So he is presumed to be an Egyptian. Why? Because he's dark. My skin is dark like the tents of Kedar. And Yahusha hid in plain sight. And when they were departed, behold, the angel of Yahuwah appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, arise and take the young child to his mother and flee into Egypt. And be thou there until I bring thee word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. And when he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night and departed into Egypt, and was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken of Yahuwah by the prophet, saying, out of Egypt have I called my son. So the only way you can hide amongst a bunch of Nubian black people, not after, 2,000 years of Europeans encroaching into Africa, all right? This is not that, because that's what we've had. And so there's a lot of people in the north and in the Middle East who are very fair-skinned, but minus 2,000 years. Everyone was very black. And so he had to hide in plain sight in the West, in Egypt, amongst very black people, where no one would notice him. So, and another description of Yahusha is that his feet were like fine brass, as if refined in a furnace, his voice as the sound of many waters. And in ASV says his feet were like burnished brass. So burnished, this is what burnished brass looks like. So it looks like jacinth or jasper. Okay, it looks like glowing metal, brownish, but like it looks like when somebody has been in the sun and is very tanned, if they're a brown skin tone and they glow like copper and chocolate. This is exactly what burnished brass looks like. These are burnished brass statues. This, of course, is why in the second Exodus, at the end of time, Yahweh says, from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my suppliants, even the daughter of my dispersed, shall bring mine offering. Because we're going to see that the ocean that we know as the Atlantic is the Ethiopic Sea. As I've said in my other videos before, I've covered so much of this already. And so it's from beyond that river into the west of Cush, where his offering will come from. All right, so let's get into it. If you'll remember, in the last lesson, we talked about how what is now the Mediterranean Sea was once all land. But that was the gates of Gibor or Gibraltar, or the pillars of Hercules. And this is referred to in Illustrations of America, illustrated by John Ogilvie. And it is also referred to in Jubilees, according to John Ogilvie, the mountains Calfe and Abel, now known as the gates of Gibraltar, the jaws of Gibraltar, were opened by an earthquake, receiving then also an inundation from the Atlantic, which now makes the Mediterranean Sea, being before all continued land. Some double this again, making 4 divisions of this our first part of the world: Europe, Asia, Aphaia, and Egypt. Others later have more reduced them to 3, joining Egypt to Asia and the other lands being Aphaia or Africa and Europe. You guys can check out all these references. I've got like about 3 or 4 of them here on both of these slides, and they will indicate that north, south, and east were all connected. North America was connected to Africa, so-called Africa, and North America was connected to so-called Eastern Europe, and it was all a circle around the center of the earth, and there was a head who ruled. These are also the accounts of the many uproars, changes in the earth, judgments really by Yah, or wars that destroyed the earth and drove the continents apart. So that's the premise that we begin with here, reverse Pangea. You guys know that's my thing. Major judgment was the judgment of Babylon, the 3 towers and the Tower of Babylon. The next one was the deliverance of Israel from Egypt. There were also just many wars and then judgments after the fall of Israel. It says there will be great earthquakes. The 4th part of the land was judged. The 4th part of the earth was judged over here in North America. And I think that contributed to the mud floods and disasters all over the world because of the fall of Israel and Yah's judgment against Israel. Or wars that destroyed the earth and drove the continents apart. So that is also the reason for the destructions in the earth. And they were always siding with Egypt. So a lot of Egypt was destroyed. Let's get into the land of Shem, and of course, guys, this is theory, but I'm trying to use scripture and historical books to prove it. So forgive any errors. Ulam, overarching principle to get into your spirit is that Yah calls heaven and earth to witness to his order. Heaven and earth witness to the way he wants things to be in their perfect state. So I've already shown you that Yah has sealed the earth with his image, and that I believe that Shem and his offspring are also sealed in that image on the earth. And so that's my theory. And that image of the head, the ruler of the earth, is also witnessed by the moon. And I believe it's manifest in this image. Hannibal's coin is very likely either King David or King Solomon's coin, with the elephant representing the pillars of the earth and the mountains below the elephant's feet representing the mountains of the moon. The shape of the head of Africa is the shape of the head of a black man, and everything else that has dispersed above in the west and in the north is his afro. And the south, which is also part of Shem's land, South America, is his neck. And there came forth on the writing as Shem's lot, the middle of the earth, which he should take as an inheritance for himself, and for his sons, and for the generations of eternity. From the middle of the mountain range of Rapha, from the mouth of the water, from the river of Tina, and his portion goes towards the west, through the midst of this river, and it extends till it reaches the water of the abyss, out of which this river goes forth and pours its waters into the sea Miat. And this river flows into the great sea, and all that is towards the north is Japheth's, and all that is towards the south belongs to Shem. And all that is towards the south belongs to Shem. And it extends till it reaches Caraso, and this is the bosom of the tongue which looks towards the south. And his portion extends along the great sea, and it extends in a straight line till it reaches the west of the tongue which looks towards the south, for this sea is named the tongue of the Egyptian sea. And it turns here towards the south, towards the mouth of the great sea on the shore of its waters, and it extends west to Afra. Wait, Ham's land is in the west? So again, Afra is Afaro. That's Pharaoh land. Shem's land, what we call Africa today, is called Aphia. And because he was the firstborn son, he got two portions, a double portion. So he got half the earth, and Ham and Japheth got a quarter each. The portion of the eldest son is what? A double portion. That is Torah. Daniel 7:25 says Hasatan would seek to change times and laws, and that the people would be delivered into his hand for a time, and half a time. And this is what Mercator was used to do. This is what the redrawing of the shape of the earth and allotments of land was set up to do. And it extends till it reaches the waters of the river Gihon, and to the south of the waters of Gihon, to the banks of this river. And it extends towards the east till it reaches the Garden of Eden, to the south thereof, to the south, and to the east of the whole land of Eden, and the whole of the east. It turns to the east, and it proceeds till it reaches east of the mountain named Rapha, and it descends to the bank of the mouth of the river Tina. This portion came forth by lot for Shem and his sons, that they should possess it forever, unto his generations forevermore. And he knew that the Garden of Eden is the Holy of Holies, and the dwelling of the Lord, and the Mount Sinai, the center of the desert, and Mount Zion, the center of the navel of the earth. These three were created as holy places facing each other. And he blessed the God of gods, who had put the word of the Lord in his mouth, and the Lord forevermore. And he knew that a blessed portion and a blessing had come to Shem and his sons unto the generations forever. Our Foxhead's land up here. And also, he said that these three great mountains, Rapha, Sinai, Zion, they all face each other, creating a triangle here. Somehow, he included the mountains of Ararat, which are in here. Okay, so Mount Ararat, India, Mount Rapha at the center of the earth, Eden, which is to the south, and on the way east, right, is to the south thereof, to the south and in the east, and Mount Zion, and all these mountains face each other. So that was the land that came forth to Shem. I believe that the Gion started probably up where the Great Lakes connected with Africa's Gates of Gibraltar, and so the Gion was probably in there and then circled all the way around the coast of North America and into the Gulf of Mexico, Caribbean Sea, and then all the way down and into what is so-called South America. Because the area between Africa and North and South America is where there are 7 streams of water, where, you know, we've gone into the whole thing of smite the 7 streams, right? This Carta Marina Nova map seems to show a circle between South America and Africa, down smack dab in the middle here, which is, you know, it's anywhere from the Gates of Gibraltar down to there, which is where Eden could be. But it's clearly showing that it's kind of the center of the world in a way. This is off the coast of South America and Africa. It seems like there is a piece of land here. So with all Isaiah 11:15 and Isaiah 42, Yah says that he will smite the 7 streams, as when Israel came out of Egypt the first time. And I will make desolate mountains and hills and dry up all their grass, and I will make the rivers islands and dry up the pools, and I will bring the blind by the way that they knew not, and I will cause them to tread upon paths which they have not known, and I will turn darkness into light and crooked things straight. So this is Peru, Persia, part of the land of Shem. See the name here, they entitle it Persia, right? And so I think this is like the neck or the heart of the, like I said, the head of the man of the earth. And these major arteries and streams run through it. So I think the River Tina will go through this, the Gion goes through this and then dumps out to the Tina. And then Africa would have been directly above it. So the water would have circled right up to the chin of Africa and gone around towards India, between what was known as Lemuria and Africa. And notice how it's cutting off what might be to the right of it, where kind of an Eden might be. So the land of Shem from here, it reaches the Garden of Eden. So the Garden of Eden is somewhere around in here. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about, you guys. We're going to see a little bit of different information. I've shown you this in other videos on my other channel, right? Atlantis has been positioned here. It may be the Garden of Eden, or maybe somewhere down here. So I went there to another place and saw a mountain of fire flashing both by day and by night. And I proceeded towards it and perceived 7 splendid mountains, which were all different from each other. Their stones were brilliant and beautiful. All were brilliant and splendid to behold, and beautiful was their surface. 3 mountains were toward the east, strengthened by being placed one upon another, and 3 were towards the south, strengthened in a similar manner. There were likewise deep valleys which did not approach each other, and the 7th mountain was in the midst of them. And he answered me, saying, that mountain which you behold, the extent of whose head resembles the seat of Yahuwah, will be the seat on which shall sit the holy and great Elohim of glory, the everlasting King, when he shall come and descend to visit the earth with goodness. Now there's another scripture that says, and Yahuwah will descend in the south in Enoch, as even today he descends in the south. Okay, so that gives us more clues. Like I said, the Rubus Negro is an indrawing sea. And there's also a sea called the Humorous Sea in the south, near Antarctica. And so the water is the bluest, the cleanest, the purest there, and all water flows north towards those indrawing seas. And so this gives us a clue as to where Eden might be. So we see how the land of Eden could be further on in the south, because Yah says he descends most often in the south, right? And then when we look at the map of the moon, it does reveal to us what is potentially going on in the south here. This is a good reference. See, there's where the map of the world fits over top on this, like so. So it fits pretty well. But what do we see here? There's land right here and all the way to here. So the moon is a great witness. When we look at the bottom of this moon map, we see the word mare vaporum. You see that in the bottom right-hand corner by where it says S for south. And it points to a sea of mare, a sea of vapors and waters just off the coast of Africa in the center of the moon. Okay, so that means there could be a special sea there. All right, the other option is this. When we take this map and we flip it vertically and we put the North Rubus Negro up here, directly beneath it is this other sea-looking thing, a circular area. And it's actually called the mare or water humorum. And if you'll notice, with all of the seas go north, all of the rivers go north. They may go east and west, but eventually they all go north, like the River Tina, the Nile. Everything flows to the north to the indrawing seas to be purified. And the oceans are the darkest up north, and they're the clearest and the cleanest and the lightest in the south. And so if this is humorum, that means water, humidity, sea of water. It could very well be that this is where the clean water potentially comes out of. Now, there are underground springs and everything that it also comes out of, because the earth is like a tree. It's got all these levels to it. And so there are underground streams beyond the sea salty water. But I'm just taking note of that because there is a lot of fresh water that comes up from the south. And it would make sense for it to travel up through oceans and rivers and everything.
The Earth of Columbus. Christopher Columbus announces to his royal patrons his supposed discovery of the ascent to the gate of the long-lost Garden of Eden. With what emotions must his heart have thrilled as, steering up this ascent, he felt his ship smoothly rising toward the sky, the weather becoming milder as he rose. To be so near the paradise of God's own planting, to be the first discoverer of the way in which the believing world could at length, after so many ages, once more approach its sacred precincts, even if forbidden to enter. What an exquisite experience it must have been to the lonely spirit of that great explorer. It is his third voyage. He is in the Gulf of Paria, to the north or northwest of the mouth of the Orinoco. In his loyal epistle to Ferdinand and Isabella, thus he writes, "The Holy Scriptures record that our Lord made the earthly paradise, and planted in it the tree of life, and thence springs a fountain, from which the four principal rivers of the world take their source, namely the Ganges in India, the Tigris and Euphrates, and the Nile." I do not find, nor ever have found, any account by the Romans or Greeks which fixes in a positive manner the site of the terrestrial paradise. Neither have I seen it given in any map monde laid down from authentic sources. Some placed it in Ethiopia at the sources of the Nile, but others, traversing all these countries, found neither the temperature nor the altitude of the sun correspond with their ideas respecting it, nor did it appear that the overwhelming waters of the deluge had been there.
Columbus may not have been altogether wrong, given the connection of the continent of Africa originally to the center north. Again, what Columbus had to say about Eden. Of paradise I cannot speak properly, for I was not there. It is far beyond, and I repent not going there, but I was not worthy. But as I have heard say of wise men beyond, I shall tell you with good will. terrestrial paradise, as men say, wise men say, is the highest place of the earth, and it is so high that it nearly touches the circle of the moon there, as the moon makes her turn. For it is so high that the flood of Noah might not come to it, that would have covered all the earth of the world, all about and above and beneath, except paradise. And this paradise is enclosed all about with a wall. See, the navigators of the earth understood that the moon made a circle in towards the center of the earth and back towards the outer ring of the earth. And that included Columbus, before the transatlantic slave trade was in full swing. Everyone knew this. Some have placed paradise in the third heaven, some in the fourth, in the heaven of the moon, in the moon itself, on a mountain near the lunar heaven, in the middle of the region of the air. Just remember, the Greeks and the Romans made these laws that no one was allowed to go into the west. And who said they wanted to hide Jerusalem? Hadrian. And so just keep this in mind. I haven't written off the Rubus Negro. I'm just saying these are the potential areas where the Garden of Eden could be. So you guys, please look at the video for the lands of Shem, Ham, and Japheth for more detail, a more detailed description. So in order to help define the lands of Israel, I want to shift now over to the land of Egypt in Africa, and the witness in part of the stars as well. So I'm not saying Egypt's religion is our religion. I'm saying the land is the land of Israel, and it's a cover-up. That's the riddle of the Sphinx. We talked about the witness of the moon and the earth, and we'll continue with the earth, but we're also going to look at the witness of the stars now. I want to now shift over to Egypt. And the reason why I want to do that is, again, reverse Pangea. There's all of these superstructures that align all over the earth. And I think those are the connecting points that help reconnect reverse Pangea. But I also want to talk about what the potential purpose of the pyramids were and their authenticity, as well as to whether or not this was really a place of Egyptian worship. Perhaps it evolved into that. But they might have just simply been power structures and energy sources. Egypt was part of the Solomonic Empire, Solomon's Empire, okay? And its golden age, the Orion age, the golden age. And it's not actually, as I've said before, the land of Ham. This is the land of Shem. And we confirmed that the pyramids were built before 1100 BC, the Egyptian ones. And they had no monoliths, they had no pillars, and they had no Sanskrit or drawings or inscriptions on them. The three pyramids of Giza existed on their own, two of them having just the two sets of three pyramids at either of their sides. All other pyramids were set up many centuries, if not thousands of years later, and that includes all the images of the Egyptian gods. It is well known that around these pyramids, these structures like this are everywhere. Although when we look at the actual pyramids themselves, the very stones are broken down and disintegrated. Concrete Abu Simbel construct was moved in the 1800s closer to the pyramid area because they started to build the Aswan Dam, and they wanted to make sure that this monument to masonry wasn't destroyed because it had been built right on the waters of the Nile. And so it was moved, and this is part of the architectural to deceive the world into believing that this is actually the land of Egypt, when the land of Egypt lies in the west. Check out all my videos on the land of Ham. There's some ancient videos on rebuilding the lost temples of Karnak, which is these images that you see of Menelik and the other three statues associated with the three pyramids in the narrative that is presented to us. However, they are not original to that area. And in fact, if you look at some of these documentaries that do speak about it, you see from this image that these idols really are made in a very flimsy way, like from some cheap Hollywood movie. And the photos of them reconstructing things could simply be a construction of a false narrative, really, because none of these shallow inscriptions could bear the passage of time without seriously degrading in the wind and just the wear of time. There's no way that these men, in reconstructing or taking apart these idols, could use a hacksaw, like a simple hand saw, to saw real stone apart. You would have to use a metal circular saw that had a diamond bit and had a lot of water to prevent it from heating up and stopping. Two guys are not going to saw it apart. And so a lot of the imagery associated with the pyramids, I believe, is false. They were actually brought up from the foot of the Nile when the Aswad Dam was built. They weren't even associated with the pyramids, but the story they tell you is that they are, that they're part of that whole area if you've never been there. The riddle of the Sphinx is that the Sphinx was not a sphinx, that it was actually a lion. A lion. Because the Sphinx, the head of the Sphinx, was much newer, much younger, and nowhere near as worn as the body of the lion. And there are geologists who have proven this. The Egyptologists say contrary, but the geologists are like, no, this stone is much older. So the Sphinx would have more likely been a lion, because Israel doesn't mix different seeds together. That's what the nations do. We also found that there was a habit among the people of this region to wear a lion's mane for a headdress, a lion's mane. So that's where this lion's mane shape comes from. But of course, it was more likely originally a lion, the Lion of Judah, as inscribed on one of the walls here. I've mentioned this before. Esdras 15 speaks of the Carmanians and who they are, and this again relates to the land. But I want to see there's also another lion at one of the extremes of the land of Shem. The dragons of Arabia and also the Carmanians. So when we look at the word karma, I said, hey, karma, what about karma? I looked it up on the map, and it's in India. So like I said, this is the land of Shem, all right? And the Carmanians, it's a place in New Delhi, which is the capital of India, all right? Carmania, all right? So it's spelt differently with a K here. Carmania is a place in the region of Bihar, India. You guys can go ahead and look this up. Got that from Wikipedia. And now we talked about before how in India there was, at the edge of it, this place on the rock of Sri Lanka. So Sri Lanka is just off India because it seems like it broke off in some kind of catastrophe, right? But in Sri Lanka is this cave temples of the lion. Now this could be a dragon or a tiger, or it could be a lion, because there were these images of this lion around as well. And so that could be Lion of Judah. That's also who the Iranians are known to be. They're known to be rams, but it is definitely a Hebrew or Shemitic symbol. And remember in the video about the Hamites, we went into this, that building, there used to be this huge empire up there, this huge structure and kingdom. You can see all this terraced land, and there were all these great waterfalls and everything that were an obstruction to make your way finally up to the kingdom. It was a strategic point for war. It was a huge kingdom, and it's claimed by the East Indians, and of course worshiping their gods. But we find out the architect was Maya Sura. So we know Asura means for Assyrian. And Maya, well, we know the Maya are the Hebrews when they were in the middle land over there between America and Africa, right? And they were called the Maya when Joseph ruled there. They were called the Maya. And so in the Hindu scriptures, they have the Maya Sura. So these are the Assyrians. And so this was a famous architect. So Asher is one of the sons of Shem. He's the second son of Shem. And his land is the land of Assyria. And so he's the ancestor of the Assyrians. And for Asher came forth, according to Jubilees 9 and 3 in the bottom right here, the second portion, all the land of Asher and Nineveh and Shinar, and to the border of India. And it ascends and skirts the river. And so they're talking about the river Tina. And so this is the land of Assyria. Now, I'm not sure, it may actually go to all the way to the Atlantic. I'm still trying to figure this out, guys, so please be patient. I don't have any ancient books on this, and I'm just looking at etymologies and words and stuff. Please give me any information that you find. Go ahead and put in the comments. So this guy was very likely a Hebrew, and there's a bit more evidence on it. So we see again that it's Assyria, Sumerian, Asher. So that is Assyria. Okay. Now they geographically show it as being different, but when you look at the words, you can distinctly see that the affiliation of this architect was with Asura, and this is in the land of Shem, so it's Assyria. I want to talk about Egypt as being part of the land of Shem, the land of Africa, because the stars truly witness to who the continent of Africa belongs to from there and from the Nile. The Ethiopians say the Egyptians are one of their colonies, had 7 sons with Abraham, and so they may have become the Ethiopians, okay? Because they were sons of Abraham, but not the sons of the promise. And so that may be the true origins of the Ethiopians. And the Egyptians here very clearly says that Gaston Maspero said by almost unanimous testimony of ancient historians is that they belong to the African race, read Negro, which first settled in Ethiopia. On the middle Nile, following the course of the river, they gradually reached the sea. Moreover, the Bible states that Mitzrahim, son of Ham, brother of Cush, the Ethiopian, so he's calling them the Ethiopian, and of Canaan came from Mesopotamia to settle with his children on the banks of the Nile. So he's saying that they were an import, okay? But they're still not giving us the origins of this term. And they're trying to say that page 83 says the Negroes represented on pharaohic paintings so clearly delineated by the engravers and named Nahasu or Nahasio in the hieroglyphics are not related to the Ethiopians, the first people to come down into Egypt. Besides, there is a scientific tendency to find in Africa, after excluding foreign influence from the Mediterranean to the Cape, from the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean, nothing but Negroes or Negroids of various colors. The ancient Egyptians were Negroes, but Negroes to the last degree. So in other words, the people who built these pyramids were Negroes. Okay, so they were descendants of Israel. But the Ethiopians were mixed with them. So that means those are the real Hamites. And remember, there was this whole historical agenda for the West to start calling Israel Hamites. And so it was the Greeks who named what is called the Nile. But there's a lot of evidence that it was actually called the Jordan River. So the Ethiopians seem to be a grafting in of Ham into the Negro line. So in accounting for Shem's lot, Jubilees 8:14 said, Shem and his portion extends along the Great Sea, and it extends in a straight line till it reaches the west of the tongue, which looks towards the south. For this sea is named the tongue of the Egyptian Sea. So everything at the top of the map to the right there where Greenland is heading south, and that's the tongue of the Egyptian Sea. So the waters of the Atlantic are the Ethiopic or Egyptian Sea. And there are 7 Gulf streams within there, okay? Freshwater Gulf streams, all right? So that is the Egyptian Sea, and it can also be considered the river of Egypt. What's the clue? Jubilees 10:29 says Canaan saw the land of Lebanon to the river of Egypt. So we can think of Lebanon potentially as Libya, to the river of Egypt. So that would be to the Ethiopic Ocean, Atlantic Ocean. That it was very good, and went not into the land of his inheritance to the west, that's America, all right, that is to the sea, the Egyptian sea. He instead dwelt in the land of Lebanon eastward. So he went east towards India and westward from the border of the Jordan River. So he was between the Jordan River, but he was, and the Egyptian Sea, Ocean, Atlantic. So he was between some huge Jordan River, but he was westward of it, but he was east of the Egyptian Sea or river, which is 7 streams. Am I making sense? I hope so. According to the Book of Beginnings and Aulus and Aulus, Egypt was named Aria. The Egyptian Aur is the name of the river Hebrew Ayar. Aria is the land of the river, possibly with the further meaning of the pure, as in Aya means to wash, white, and purify. So Ayar could be the Jordan River. Now, Hammurabi of the northern kingdom was to be the one who built the pyramids, okay? Now, these are the people of the northern kingdom who have a history of being builders, and they themselves say that. And so what I'm going to do is quote regarding Abraham teaching science to the Egyptians, so that we can know and understand that the Shemitic people would have already had these sciences. And I'm also going to first quote from a false book that mixes truth with a lie, that confirms that he taught sciences to them. But then it says that the Egyptians taught him wisdom, which wouldn't make any sense because they didn't have Yah. They had Satan as their god. They had the serpent. They had Quetzalcoatl. They didn't have Yahuwah. So he would have taught them both wisdom and science. And so this tradition was followed by Daniel, who also used sciences, and Haram-Abi. So Haram-Abi, Haram, was the son of a widow woman, and he was of the tribe of Naphtali, and his father was a Tyrian, a worker in brass and accomplished in art, skill and knowledge to work every work in brass, and he was brought into King Solomon, and he wrought all the works. Okay, and Judges 132 says that, scrolling down here, Asher dwelt in the midst of the Canaanite who inhabited the land, for he could not drive him out. And Naphtali did not drive out the inhabitants of Beth-Semes, nor the inhabitants of Beatanach. And so what happens is, when you look at the book of Masonic rites, of course there's going to be trickery in there because the Prince of Tyre is truly Satan, but they actually name Haram-Abi as the Prince of Tyre. And as I've said before, Abif can mean abyss. So he had a darkness on him. According to Oriental Masonry, it came to pass that when the temple was completed, that Solomon hesitated to dedicate it for 2 reasons. First, on account of the death of Haram-Abi. Second, on account of the fact that with the death of the widow's son, the master's word and the secret manner of using it had been lost. Therefore, Solomon called a secret council. The secret council consisted of Solomon, king of Israel, Hiram, king of Tyre, and Zadok, the high priest. So Hiram was known as the king of Tyre also, according to these people. Is listed twice. It seems that Haram-Abi was known to be the king of Tyre. Well, I'm just showing you this to show you that the 10 tribes were the builders. They were known to be the builders. Okay? So this image depicts the true builders of the temples in what we know is as Egypt today, and I believe they're the 10 tribes properly represented here. Abram brought sciences to the Egyptians, and that is according to Josephus in chapter 8, that Abraham had communicated to them arithmetic and delivered to them the science of astronomy. For before Abram came into Egypt, they were unacquainted with those parts of learning, for that science came from the Chaldeans into Egypt, and from thence to the Greeks also. Jacob is the former of all things. Abram gave them the centimeter, the millimeter, the meter, the cubit, and the golden ratio.
Fresh water from the Nile. They measured one drop and then another. They were all the same size. The diameter of the drop of water on a waterproof surface, like granite or alabaster, is constant. It measures 1 centimeter. The meter is a universal unit because it is measured on water. Water is the only material that is stable. All other materials or objects are difficult to measure, or else they vary over time. The architecture of the entire universe is constructed with this unit. They named this small unit the royal finger. 10 drops of water or 10 royal fingers equals 1 royal hand. 100 drops of water, so 100 royal fingers or 10 royal hands, equals 1 royal leg. The royal finger was called the centimeter, the royal hand the decimeter, and the royal leg the meter. From this experience, they also deduced the decimal system. From then on, all of Egypt would have as a standard a universal constant, the royal cubit, the golden ratio. Pi, the golden ratio, the royal cubit, the whole panoply of sacred geometry with the meter. The Egyptians knew the Fibonacci sequence in the golden number thousands of years before him and called it the addition sequence.
When we examine the symbol for house, Bayet, it is this golden ratio. So this is the family, the tent, the house, the earth. This is the code for everything, and this is why Hebrew is a pictographic language, because it speaks practically to reality. The meter had so many biblical references. All of these measurements did. And some of the primary ones was the meter, which is called mitznefeth, or official turban or diadem for the high priest. And so I give a lot of references, but one of the main ones was Leviticus, and he shall put on the holy linen coat, and he shall have the linen breeches upon his flesh, and shall be girded with a linen girdle, and the linen mitre. With the linen mitre he shall be attired, and these are the holy garments. Therefore shall he wash his flesh in water, and so put them on. And so you can imagine it was about 1 meter long, and it would be wrapped around the head as a turban or a headband and whatnot. Also, there were holy measurements for buildings. A window shalt thou make to the ark, so this is at the time of Noah. In a cubit shalt thou finish it above. So this is before the Egyptian Empire. Okay? Also in Ezekiel, it says, and behold, a wall outside the house and round about, in the man's hand a measuring reed of 6 cubits long by cubit, and a hand breadth. So he measured the breadth of the building 1 reed. Now here in Ezekiel, in these various verses, including Revelation, it says the length of a reed is given as 6 cubits, each being about a cubit and a palm, or hand's breadth. Okay, so those are the measurements that were just described to us in Egypt. Cornerstone, a key Hebraic concept developed possibly from the Egyptian captivity, but principally and probably first related to Hamashiach, Yahusha.
They pour the white concrete, and about 30 minutes later the mold is filled. Today we call this process formwork construction.
So stubble or straw was basically crushed rock used to make formwork bricks. This was the origins of masonry, which the Hebrews had originated, and they used it when they were in Egypt to build their structures and their own pyramids at Giza, of course, the Israelites. And so here's some scriptures that prove it. Exodus 5:12. So the people were scattered abroad throughout all the land of Egypt to gather stubble instead of straw. The word is teben, and it's from the word H1129 in Strong's, and it says straw, threshing, or chaff, but the origin is said to be doubtful, but not improbable, and it really denotes building material. And then we have another example in scripture where Job says the arrow cannot make him flee, sling stones are turned with him into stubble. So stubble is another word for ground up stone, and so that's how we know that it was actually ground up stone that was used to make a cement-like substance to construct the pyramids for Solomon and the pyramids for the Egyptians. Deuteronomy 6 shows us how Yah gave the cities of the giants and the nations to Israel, and they maintained them. They were also able to build, especially the northern kingdom. So Deuteronomy 6 says, "And it came to pass, when Yahuwah thy Elohim shall have brought thee into the land, which he sware to thy fathers, to Abraham and to Isaac and to Jacob, to give thee, great and beautiful cities, which thou did not build, houses full of all good things, which thou did not fill, wells dug in ore, pits or pools, the rock which thou didst not dig, vineyards and olives which thou did not plant. Then having eaten and being filled, beware lest thou forget Yahuwah thy Eloha, that brought thee forth out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage." Find very much so in places like Britain, for example, in the UK, Spain, and so on. We have all of these buildings that were constructed. Some of them are left over from the giants because that's what the scripture says will happen, that Israel will return to their lands and they will get the buildings of the giant. The other thing is that the Hebrews, the 10 tribes in particular, did a lot of building, construction, and formwork. Why you see in Columbus's and Cortez's New World discoveries, you see these images of these people living in the midst of these beautiful buildings, and they're not necessarily out of scale for them, like some of the ones that were taken over from the giants. Also, the 10 tribes were brick makers, and I want you to watch this video about the 10 tribes who still remain in America who are brick makers and their relationship to ancient structures.
Okay, a lot of the truth was in the St. Louis Cathedral. Where did they put the records? A lot of the truth was in the Cabildo. Where is it? A lot of the truth is inside the tombs of the graves that's at St. Louis Cathedral, because they have a lot of Indians buried in there too. The bricks that built St. Louis Cathedral, my people made those bricks. The bricks that built the tomb in the older graves came from my people. Those St. Louis Cathedral, my people made those bricks. The bricks that built the tomb in the older graves came from my people.
Remember, the tribes of Israel always buried their family members in tombs, not in the earth, and they didn't burn them.
The architect Hemiunu and Khufu go up symbolically to unveil the pyramidion. The pyramidion is revealed. The crowd shouts with joy. 20 years of hard work for their king is coming to an end.
King Solomon was known as the master builder. To the Masons, he's known as the master builder, the master mason. So people become kinds of Solomon. Now, what happened with the northern kingdom was that Jeroboam, who was a widow's son, was made a servant of Solomon because he was very industrious. But at one point, it says in 1 Kings 11:9, that he went out, and this prophet Ahijah, the Shilonite, finds him on the way and says tears his garment and says Yah's going to tear the kingdom into 10 pieces and give it to him. So this makes Solomon very angry, and he sends him away, and so Jeroboam flees to Egypt. And when he hears Solomon is dead, he returns, but then the son of Solomon, he goes to speak to him and the son about their burden, the yoke of Israel that is too heavy. And the son of Solomon says, whereas my father did lade you with a heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke. My father has chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions. And it comes to pass consequently that when Jeroboam comes to the tribe of Israel again, that they call him into the congregation and they make him king over Israel. And none of them follow the house of David except for the tribe of Judah alone.
The pyramid was oriented east, relative
to Eden and Yah.
Orientation to the east automatically indicates all directions with the same precision. Indeed, the Egyptians did not care about the north. There was nothing in the north apart from primitive peoples. The south was sacred to them because it was where they came from, their roots. It is for this reason that cities were then built up the Nile, to be closer to their origins.
The truth is that the Most High will descend in the south.
The first quarter is called the east, because it is the first, and the second the south, because the Most High will descend there. Yea, there in quite a special sense will he who is blessed forever descend.
The position of the sun is exactly facing the king's sarcophagus. There is much debate over whether the pyramids are tombs, and whether the sarcophagi are intended for bodies.
Ever since scientists have been studying the Great Pyramids there at Giza, there has been speculation that they may have been energy generators, some kind of power plants. And of course, the mainstream Egyptologists are saying, oh, these are just simple tombs for pharaohs.
But the Great Pyramid has the precision of a machine, and so when you consider it as a machine, you see that there are certain functions that each part of the pyramid performs. The subterranean chamber is evidence itself, and it has been demonstrated by an engineer by the name of John Cadman, who created a model of the subterranean chamber, and by feeding water in it, the chamber itself seems to cause some very unusual reactions in the pyramid.
The water would rush down the shaft of the Great Pyramid down to the subterranean chamber, which was about 330 feet. It would bypass a valve, and then the valve would slam shut, and it would cause a shock wave to be sent up the Great Pyramid itself, and then it would shoot towards the ceiling that was directly below the King's Chamber. It's a freestanding granite tuned room, and it would cause that to resonate at a specific frequency.
The granite is the same material that you would use in a microphone or a telephone. It vibrates through the introduction of sound, and it emits electrons. Well, you take that phenomenon and you control it inside the Great Pyramid, then you have a machine that can vibrate that granite as much as an earthquake would vibrate granite in the earth and create electromagnetic energy.
Christopher Dunn's theories indicates that the Great Pyramid was sending microwave signal. And in fact, studies of his working devices have shown that this probably would work. We could have been sending messages into space. It's very similar to the SETI program.
It is my suspicion, belief, and hypothesis that what they call the King's Chamber or the sarcophagus relates very much more to the Sephargus. Sefer guys. Now, I haven't checked the etymology, but in my spirit, I'm like, I wonder, and I hope I'm not wrong, and I hope Yah forgives me just for speculating on this, but I wonder if that's where they might have put something like the ark or the stones to create a geyser which sent the words of Yah out through the top of these light generators. And they would possibly hit the firmament and disperse the word or the message over the world, or perhaps it was a form of praise to Yah. It was perhaps projected through them, and they were perhaps stone tablets or something like that were placed in the sarcophagus, and then the electrical frequency was sent out, not only creating a light in the world, but like a geyser, like a Sefer geyser. It sent the water, the living water of the word, out to the world in the same way that the priests wore the ephod, which had the Urim and Thummim on it, which would also, they'd use that and the lights on it to make decisions and get light-based frequencies from Yah or the Ruach HaKodesh in order to make decisions and determinations. In the worst case scenario, they would be places where half alien or Rephaim would sleep to power themselves at night, or fallen angels. In the worst case scenario, it would be where fallen angels or Rephaim would sleep to strengthen themselves at night, being in their dying state, like vampires. And these ley lines line up with both the largest pyramid in the world, which is in Mexico, and Stonehenge, which of course is in Britannia. And ironically, these are also ley lines that button, if you will, or connect or link, what we call the continent of Africa, which I say is Afaya, back to the center of the earth when we reverse Pangea and connected at Greenland. So those 3 points of great ley lines that were mentioned in the documentary I included in this teaching button the land of Shem back up into the center of the earth. And there's no one theorizing on Egypt's connection to Americas as being factors to the structures that are on both lands. Another thing that we looked at was we looked at the stars, and we looked in particular at the cluster Orion, which lines up with the 3 great pyramids. And the stars also speak of Israel. Their names were looked at in Arabic and Hebrew, and we learned that there was the constellation Kessel, which means strong one or hero, or Orion means Orion, in other words, light age, age of light, or golden age, or heaven. And of course, Betelgeuse is like Betelgeuse, so house of bread, house of the Jews. Analim and Regal and Messiah are also part of this star system, and they speak to the Messiah, the regal one, and of course Orion's belt is like the belt of truth, and there's supposed to be a scabbard or a sword hanging down as well. So it very much speaks to the nature and culture and prophecy of this being the kingdom of Israel. Pyramids were power generators, not tombs, because according to this ancient document from the Egyptians at the time when the Hebrews left them and they were in a state of chaos, they say that none shall sail northwards to Byblos today. What shall we do for cedar trees for our mummies, with the produce of which priests are buried and with the oil of which chiefs are embalmed, as far as Kishfu. So in other words, they didn't bury people in pyramids, and here's more confirmation.
Many of the sarcophagi were empty when discovered. Almost all mummies, whether they are important figures in society or not, have been found in wooden coffins and not in granite sarcophagi.
We look at these people coming up from the south, perhaps, towards Central and North America. We can see they look very black, and they were likely other Shem'ites who were in the Brazilian regions. The constellation of Orion is often called Orion the Hunter, but it is just currently that, as Esau is ruling the world, and he's known to be the hunter. It is truly representative of Israel and Jacob and Hamashiach standing up. You see he's got the belt of truth. He's got the sword of the Spirit. I believe this is his torso. And the little triangle at the top, that is his breastplate of righteousness with Messi at the solar plexus of his body, or the Messiah. So these are the names of some of the stars and constellations. And so this sword is very important because it is hanging down from his scabbard, and then it is raised up in a couple of ways. It's raised up to against the north and the west at a certain point, and then it is thrown out to strike Hades, and we'll see how that works. But it is also how the nations would navigate everybody, not by the North Pole, but by Orion.
So, let's find directions with it. I'll pitch the technique quickly, but then we'll expand on it and further understand it on a fundamental level of Orion across our night sky. So it appears in the east, travels across the southern side of the sky, and disappears into the west. Does that ring any bells? I can think of another star that follows a similar motion, fades into the east, travels across the southern side of the sky, and eventually fades away into the west. Repeating that for emphasis. So we won't use this constellation to find north directly. Oh no. We will use it to find north indirectly through using it to find south, east, and west. So, how? The first thing to take into consideration is its tilt. As a general rule, when it's tilted to the left, it's eastern. When it's upright, it's south. When it's tilted to the right, it's west. And you can judge the severity of the tilt by looking at the sword.
What's interesting is that, of course, it lines up perfectly with the three pyramids, and even the belt of Orion, when it is facing northwest, the whole belt lines up perfectly with the tiny pyramids on the far right of Khufu. Over here at the smaller one, Menkaure. So if Solomon was in close relationship as usual with the Egyptians, having built these pyramids would point back to the west, where the originators of these pyramids came from. The belt of Orion also lines up when it's facing south. Properly lined up, the whole structure is man facing southeast. And so that is Israel. And his sword is up against the west. The whole thing is used to show the movement of the stars, and it's used to orient people in the north, south, east, and west. It's like an arrow that points to everything. I want to just break down some of the names of these stars into Hebrew. So I haven't broken down all of them, but just a quick shot. Capella would be Het, wall, or Lamed, led to the Pei, face, mouth. Or Ariga would be Aleph, head, Resh, leader, head, Gemel, led. Menkalin is connected to the third pyramid, Menkal, in so-called Egypt. And it's got the Mem, it's got the K for Ka'al, calf, giving, hand, open palm, light, led, Lamed. And then it's Nun, two ends to the seed. So we see this is all talking about Israel, Hamashiach, and Yah in some of these names. So go ahead and check them out for yourself. Orion's constellation, we find that historically it was used to orient the whole earth, as I say. But when we look at it, we also see that right above this hourglass, or this Orion's belt of truth, is Al-Riga, which is like Aleph for the head and Riga. And so that's a combination of many of the stars' names within Orion's belt. And then we see what is Taurus here. It looks like a sword being thrown down to the right upon Hades. And so he is going to rise up, or has risen up, and is going to kill death and hell. And that is his head. Now remember, this is a dome over us. And so if you look at it that way, his belt being very narrow, his legs are actually some other stars beneath him, which they name Lupus and other names, which are long legs. And so this is really the Aleph of the earth. And this is really the head by which all things are in the celestial stars are oriented. So we even see in this depiction of the Great Rift, and they call it the Milky Way, but it's the Great Rift in the sky, probably where the firmament of the earth was cracked and the Great Deluge came down to destroy the earth. But we see the head is at the center of the Great Rift. The Aleph, the head, Yahuwah, is at the center of the Great Rift. And you see up above it to the so-called top, but not the middle, on the top of this representation of the cosmology, you see the North Star, but it's not in the middle of the Great Rift where the water comes down from Eden and probably the Great Deluge came from. There is the North Pole. And so we see here that it's truly the Aleph, our Origa, that is the center of the earth, the head, and that's where Yah is. So I'm just learning this. This is contradicting a lot of my videos, but hallelujah for that. And there has been, it appears to me, to be a slippage of orientation of the planet, and that's due to the land of Shem and the land of Abraham and Israel being shifted down south due to reverse Pangea and all the other spiritual traumas that affected the earth. And so this is why the book of Enoch, in several translations, says that Yah will descend in the south. That he will descend in the south. And he continues to descend in the south, because that is the land of Shem. But once again, remember, the whole world orients themselves according to the man facing southeast, the Orion constellation, and these pyramids. And it's said that Yah will descend in the south in the book of Enoch.
First quarter is called the east, because it is the first, and the second the south, because the Most High will descend there. Yea, there in quite a special sense will he who is blessed forever descend.
The most prominent god and earliest god to imitate Hamashiach is this god Quetzalcoatl.
The greatest architect in the history of humanity is Hemiunu, the one who designed the Khufu pyramid, with less than 1% error. The pyramids are not aligned with the 3 stars in the middle of the constellation of Orion, as argued by Boval. The Alnitak star falls 150 meters outside the Menkaure pyramid. 150 meters of error is huge and unlikely compared to the accuracy of the alignment of the pyramids to 1 centimeter. The 3 pyramids are aligned with the Betelgeuse stars, Alnilam and Rigel. The correlation is perfect. We see a form of egocentrism in Khafre, who wanted to outdo his father. He built his pyramid as large as that of his father. He positioned it so that it corresponds with the heart of the Orion, the star Alnilam, obliging his son Menkaure to line up with the Rigel. Khafre also built the main roadway in alignment with the night rising of Alnilam.
Zodiac, now I don't mean astrology, I mean constellations, can also be pronounced Zadok, which means righteousness. Or can also mean gold, an eon, age, or world, golden age.
Golden ages are times of enlightenment, when civilizations reach high points in architecture, spirituality, and benevolence.
And Israel called this constellation Kessia, or strong one or hero. And you'll notice in some of the images I showed, it looks like a cup, an hourglass, okay? And then the principal star in it is Betelgeuse, which is like Bethel, house of bread, juice. House of bread, Yahudim, juice, or in Hebrew it means coming of the branch, coming of the branch. Now, one thing I want to be pretty clear about before we go a little bit more into the Northern Kingdom here is that there were several captivities. Israel underwent several captivities. Wall reliefs in America show the Egyptian captivity, where Joseph ruled and then everyone was enslaved. And there, of course, was the Medo-Persian captivity. And, of course, the evidence of who the people are in wall reliefs and paintings and sculptures and so on. So you really clearly see that these are black people. The Shemitic people are black, and their captives also are Negro and black. And of course, the Assyrian captivity was the captivity that sent the 10 tribes into North America. So Zephaniah says, from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. So that is the ocean, the Atlantic, the Ethiopic Sea, my suppliants, even the daughter of my dispersed shall bring mine offering. So what was Joseph and the people of Israel called when they were in the land of Egypt? So we've gone into this book before, Queen Mu, which displays this wall relief that shows the map of the earth, the known earth at that time, and identifies the Israelites. There is a root and branch of Jesse. So another word for the word for water in Hebrew is mayim. In the symbolism of the blue map that I showed you originally in the first image, these people are the tree planted by the water, in the land of the 7 streams. And now they've come to Egypt, the mayim, in the watery land and the sea. They come via the watery land and the sea, the mayim, and the Shemayim, the waters above of the heavens. They are of the waters above of the heavens. One of the things that scripture says is that Yah says his people are called by his name. And so in Psalm 68, his name is stated very clearly. Sing unto Yahuwah, sing praises to his name, extol him that rideth upon the heavens by his name. Yah, rejoice before him. So his name is Yah. His name is Yah. See, look, Y-A. That's the Yod. His name is Yah because that's the Yod and the Hey, the Yod of the right hand and the Hey of praise. And so Yah also says it in Exodus, I am that I am. Okay, so when we look at it, it's the same word, Hayah. So in this case, you see you have the Yah at the end, and this is Hayah. So it starts with the Hey, and then it goes to the right hand, the Yod, and then the Hey again. So it's praise, the right hand of praise. So it's praise, the self-existent one, cause of praise. Root, we can go into that again. Awe. This one is awe without the Y. Let's look at another primitive root. This one is with the aleph. Awa. This is to desire, crave, long, or lust for. So that's more, and so you see these fine differences give you the difference between the snake versus Yah. So when you hear people going, Hawa, this is desire, lust, longing. So this is snake-like. Here's the other root, Hayah. So this one is related to the cause, the self-existent one. And so you see the fine differences. Satan's usually trying to be right there beside Yah. There he is trying to be Yah, and there's Yah for real. You have the Yod in here. So you see the right hand is there. That's the hand in Bereshit. The first word of creation has the right hand in it. All right, so that's the cause. And so that's how you know the difference between worshiping the serpent and worshiping Yahuwah. Hawa that is wrong. That's the serpent. One is Ha-Ya, and the other one is just Ya. They're both right. You can't necessarily go by translations or other words you see online and stuff like that, or their false god, or they're naming the false god, you know, something else. You have to understand the Hebrew letters. So this is the Hey. So this is like saying praise Yah. Hayah is like saying praise Yah. Because what? It's a picture of the Hey, a man raising up his hands to praise Yah. So that's like saying praise Yah. My name is praise Yah. And the other one's saying my name is Yah. The cause. The hand of praise. The cause of praise. Right? The creator of praise. So that's the Yod of praise. See, it's on either side, right? So that's why when you say Yahuwah, and then other people say, oh no, then that's different. You look at the letters. The Yod, the right hand of praise, secured and awed by praise. Same thing. You've got Yah at the beginning, secured and awed by praise. Okay? So it's just, you just got to look at the letters. As long as his name Yah is in there, you know his name. Please, you guys, don't send me any videos. Oh, this is what his name is. Okay, so Yah's people are called by his name. So the Maya are called by his name. Yah. Now, Yakskin, Yaks is, so when you're talking about Jacob, that was his name before Yah called him Israel, it was Jacob, so it would be Yaakov. Or Yatsik. Isaac. Isaac was the father of Jacob. So another, even Russian name for Jacob or Jack is Yatsik. So these are Yatsik's kin, because Isaac went to Egypt as well. So they were, oh, you guys are Jacob's, you're Isaac's kin. Isaac's kin. Okay? Jacob's or Isaac's kin, okay? So Isaiah 1:11 says, then a shoot will spring from the stump of Jesse, and a branch from his roots will bear fruit. The spirit of Yahuwah will rest upon him, the spirit of wisdom and understanding. The ruach of counsel and strength, of knowledge and fear of Yahuwah. Now, what Esau did was he is representing HaSatan, who is the cedar tree. And so thus saith the Most High, a great eagle with great wings, long-winged, full of feathers, which had diverse colors, came unto Lebanon and took the highest branch of the cedar. He cropped off the top of his young twigs and carried it to the land of traffic and set it in a city of merchants. So this is Esau setting himself up in the city of merchants. There was also another great eagle with great wings and many feathers. And behold, this vine did bend her roots toward him and shot forth her branches toward him, that she might water it by the furrows of her plantation. So this was Israel's root and branch of Jesse watering and feeding the cedar tree that was a fruitless tree that is represented by Esau, Edom. Yea, being planted, shall it prosper? Shall it not utterly wither when the east wind toucheth it? So this is the branch. Okay, guys? The root and branch of Jesse, either represented by a tree or like the root of something like a vine, a grape vine. Okay? And these people were associated with the 7th month of the calendar. Now they were already practicing tabernacles. So Noah, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob all did tabernacles. Okay, before Moses, and that's in the 7th month. So these people were known as the people of the 7th month, the festival of tabernacles in the 7th month. And it means also vigorous sun. But that's who these people are. And we know because of 2nd Esdras 13:43 talks about how these tribes, 10 tribes, came here to America. And there's also a picture of a branch in the map. And the scripture says that the root and branch of Israel is Jesse. This is how an Ak is a name for brother. Remember I said that before, Ak, my Yak. So my brother Shem, my Yak. And these are Isaac's king, Isaac's children, offspring. All right, so it's noticed that the tree represents a kingdom. The feather represents warriors to the Egyptians, okay? The character, this kind of face thing means as a shoot, a branch from the trunk of the tree is indicated by the representation of Yak, okay? Ma is also the shoot. Of course, we have all these wall reliefs witnessing to the presence of the Hebrews. I think actually the pointy things, they added the hook things on top, but the rest of it is kind of looking like some turbans, hopefully. And of course, they've got their, skirts wrapped around their waists because they gird up their loins when they go for war, and they deal in only one piece of fabric, right? One whole akkad piece of fabric, because what? Yahuwah is one. He is akkad. Now, with respect to the northern kingdom, the scripture, the Jubilees does say that basically Britain, Spain, Germany, all of that is the land of the north, the land of the northern kingdom. And so what do we find when we look at the constellation above the northern kingdom? We see the 7 sisters, the 7 stars. And we see the 7 sisters, the 7 stars. And that is the Big Dipper, okay? And the Big Dipper is what is used to orient yourself according to the seasons. It divides perfectly the 4 seasons. So spring, summer, winter, and fall are divided according to how the 7 sisters work, these 7 stars. And they all rotate around the Polaris star at the center of the earth. Next episode, we will read some books describing the people of the north. How do we know the Big Dipper represents the 7 spirits before Yah's throne and the stars are aligned with them? Revelations 1 and 4 says that when John speaks to the 7 churches in Asia, he says, which is to come, and from the 7 spirits which are before his throne, meaning before Yahuwah's throne. Revelation 3:1 says, and unto the angel of the church of Sardis write these things, that he that hath the 7 spirits of Yahuwah, the 7 stars. I know your works, that thou hast a name, that thou livest and art dead. Okay, so we know that 7 spirits of Yahuwah are the 7 stars. And Revelation 4:5, again referring to these 7 spirits, it says that out of the throne proceeds lightnings and thunderings and voices, and there were 7 lamps of fire burning before the throne, which are the 7 spirits. So we see lamps of fire, perhaps like stars. And then Revelations 5:6, and behold, and lo, in the midst of the throne of the 4 beasts, and in the midst of the elders stood a lamb that had been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of Yahuwah sent forth into all the earth. So these 7 spirits align with the 7 stars, which have been called the Pleiades. All right, over here to the right, we see that that's what they're called. And they're in the constellation of Taurus. Now, in the configuration in the desert, and I'm not talking about zodiac, I'm talking about Zadok, I'm talking about the righteous constellations. I'm not talking about astrology and using the 7 planets, which are not the 7 sisters or the 7 spirits or the 7 stars. They are not. The sun and the moon and Saturn and all that are not the 7 stars. They're planets of fallen angels, except for the sun and the moon. Okay? But, so when I say Taurus, they're under that constellation, and the bull is what Ephraim and Manasseh symbolize. So in the configuration of the 12 tribes in the desert, the symbol given to Ephraim was the symbol of the bull. Okay, just like the symbol of Israel is the ram, and it's also the lion. It's also the symbol for Judah was the lion, and the symbol for Ephraim was the bull. Okay? So this very much lines up with them being so grafted into the other nations because they were in the north right beside all the Gentiles. And that's who they really grafted in with. And then Judah was later grafted in after the fall of the temple. But keep in mind, Simeon, Ephraim, and Manasseh returned for the building of the second temple. So they got scattered at the same time that Judah and Levi and Benjamin got scattered. The other tribes were scattered earlier. So there is a potential that the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom shared the shining lands of the seven streams through both their relationship to the Rubus Negro at the center of the north, all the way down to lands that may have existed between the east and the west, which they might have called Atlantis in the past. And so I haven't let go of either theory. I'm just trying to give you guys the option or look for answers if you guys have any suggestions in terms of good resources for books, etc. But what I'd like to do is just read the testimony of Orestes about that land. And then after that, I'll come to a close, and we can then go into further into the lands of the Northern Kingdom next week. The Greek's letter of Orestes, when he went to go and visit the kingdom of Jerusalem, provides a lot of clues as to the nature of the land and water distribution in the empire of Jerusalem, and would probably provide more clues as to what was going on in the empire of the lion, the empire of Solomon. For the country is well adapted not only for agriculture but also for commerce, and the city is rich in arts and lacks none of the merchandise which is brought across the sea. It possesses two suitable and commodious harbors at Ascalon, Joppa, and Gaza. It goes on to say that it produces everything in abundance. Since it is well watered in all directions and well protected from storms, the river Jordan, as it is called, which never runs dry through the land. Originally, the country contained not less than 60 million acres, though afterwards neighboring peoples made incursions against it, and 600,000 men were settled on farms upon it of 100 acres. The river, like the Nile, rises in harvest time and irrigates a large portion of the land near the district belonging to the people of the Ptolemies, corn pole. It issues into another river, and this flows out into the sea. Other mountain torrents, as they are called, flow down into the plain and encompass parts about Gaza and the district about Ashdod. The land of Aram is supposed to be in Mesopotamia between the Tigris and the Euphrates. And we can assume, I'm not quite fully accurate and focused on it quite yet. I'm moving towards it. So again, theory. But Mesopotamia implies middle land. So middle of the head of Africa. It's usually pushed over to the east. But I think they've mistaken the Tigris River. They call the Tigris River something else. But I think it's actually the Danube River. The river of Dan. The land of Aram is, according to Jubilees 9, is said to be in Mesopotamia between the Tigris and the Euphrates to the north of the Chaldees. So here's the Euphrates. And we pull out and we see the Euphrates. And there it is, right beside Hitha right above Iraq, and Syria is over there to the left with Lebanon, okay? And now here's the Tigris. Look at the Tigris is right by Baghdad. It's like literally just so very close to Iran and Assyria. It's like almost in the exact same place. How could this possibly be a border? It's between these two lands. That's not enough land. Am I right, family? Is that enough land? I don't think so. I don't know. What do you think? I mean, aren't they literally like right on top of each other? They're right on top of each other, right by Iraq. To be in Mesopotamia between the Tigris and the Euphrates to the north of the Chaldees. So it would be north of the Chaldean Assyrian lands, right? So north towards the mountains. The border of the mountains of Ashur, the land of Ararat. So we're thinking Ararat Mountains, right? All right, the border of the mountains of Ararat. And so that would be the other side of it would be the Tina River, right? And so they're talking about the Tigris River. So there's the Euphrates, which is a huge river, but the Volga River is the longest river in Eastern and Western Europe. That becomes the Ganges, after dumping into many rivers, lakes, and streams. The next largest river is the Danube River, the Dan River. And it is also known to be very rapid and have a lot of movement. And the word for it is Hedekel, which sounds like Heidi of the hills. I tried to find the etymology on this and I could not tie Heidi to anything. And so, but Hedekel. And so it says in Daniel 10:4, ironically Daniel, right? And in the 24th day of the first month, as I was by the side of the great river, which is Hiddekel, the Tigris River. It's known as a rapid river, rapid moving river. And I looked up rapid moving rivers for what they call the Tigris and Euphrates, and there was no water rapids or running on the rapids tours or parts of it that are wild, but definitely on the Danube River, there's these crazy wild rapids. I mean, this is looking like what you see in the mountains in British Columbia and stuff, right? They have wild rapid tours there. And so it is a rapid river, and there's a ton of images of various parts of it that are rapid moving, okay? And so it says of Aram's land again, between the Tigris and the Euphrates, to the north of the Chaldees, to the border of the mountains of Ashur, the land of Ararat, all right? So, and other words for it are Tiras, Tyra, Tyrlo, Tiras. All right, so it does tie into Tyre, but again, I don't know, I'm kind of getting the sense that this is really the Tigris River. And Lud, one of the other sons, we're going to get into this in the next chapter, but one of the other sons of Shem also gets this land that looks like it's Western Europe. And his land is next to Aram's land, east of it, okay? East of it. And east is not meaning west, it's meaning all of this land is east. This is east until you hit the other side of the Atlantic or Ethiopic Sea, which is called the west. All right? So it says that there came forth for London, the fifth portion, the mountains of Ashur, so all the mountains in between, the Alps or whatever, and all pertaining to them till it reaches the Great Sea, till it reaches the east of Ashur, his brother. And so the Great Sea, some might be like, oh, that's the Black Sea. I'm thinking that it's the seas of the north and the Egyptian Sea, all right? That's the best I can do. Like I said, this is theory. So when Abraham got all his lands, he got the lands between the Nile, which would be the Egyptian Sea, and the Euphrates, which would be Elam, which would be just between India and what we would currently today call like Assyria. So Elam is like in this zone here. It says Ephraim or Apharia are regular derivative forms of Aphara. And from them is obviously derived Iberia, the ancient name of western parts of Europe, including Gaul and Spain. Homer uses, in that sense, the appellations of Hyperia and Aphria. So we're going to get a sense that this is both the northern and southern kingdom from this word, okay? Because Ephraim was what? One of the sons of Joseph, and he ruled over the northern kingdom. So you're talking about Iberia. Now, we're going to go more into the northern kingdom in our second part of the series, but right now we're focusing on geography and the land. Remember, Esau is partly responsible for the Isaurian captivity, the Assyrian captivity, the Sahara, the Isara desert, right? Prester John. So during the Assyrian captivity, this Prester took Israel over to North America. Now they went in all four directions all over the earth, but this is one of the principal captivities. The Assyrian captivity led the 10 tribes to Eretz Azareth, which is on this national Canadian map. And that is where the 10 tribes went. And when you look at the world map, you see the back of the head of Africa connects to what is called Shafunkta now, and that is the Florida region, where a lot of the 10 tribes, the black people with kinky hair, not the Bering Crossing semi-Asian looking people, but that is where some of the 10 tribes dwelt. And of course that is confirmed in the Jewish Encyclopedia and in the account by Columbus, who brought with him Hebrew interpreters to speak with the people who were residing there in North America. And he was fond of reading the fourth book of Esdras, which is known as Second Esdras, because this is where they went to dwell in a land where no man dwelt, time out of mind. So, what did Montezuma have to say to Cortez when he came? His cousin, Cortez. His cousin, because the Cortez was an Edomite. He was Esau Edom. He was black, mixed race. And so he was meeting with his cousin, Jacob, one of the 10 tribes. It says, the unhappy Montezuma said of Cortez, the Spanish conqueror of Mexico, right? We know, said the unhappy monarch, in his first interview with the Spanish general, by our books, that myself and those who inhabit this country are not natives, but strangers who came from a great distance. So they're saying we're not really from this land, we're really the 10 tribes who came over here, and we call ourselves the Mayas because that's what our relative Joseph called himself when he came here. That the Egyptians called us the Mayas. Okay? So this was the beginning of the punishment of the 10 tribes of Israel for remaining in the land of Egypt. Remember, I showed you all those scriptures. Don't go down to Mitzrayim. Don't go down, Yah says a million times in scripture. Don't. What do? They go. Of course. But when we look at King James and we look at Charles I, his son, him pleading for mercy, close up in this photo we see calico. Ephraim is coat of many colors, Joseph, calico. And of course, Hibernia and that end of Europe, and even in Western Africa, both Western Africa and Western Europe were called calico or gallico. And of course, there's the Rubus Negro in the background, and it was called Galatia. Look at the Northern Kingdom next broadcast, and the lands of love, Lud and Asser, a description of the people in the land, the color of their skin, geographical places. And so, sorry, I haven't gotten the Tartarians yet because I have to cover all of this so we can see when the switch takes place. And so once we've covered this territory, I'll go back over to the Tartarians so you can see exactly when they begin to take over Europe and then they take over North America and all of that kind of stuff. And you see the genetic mixing of those tribes and them taking over the world. Okay, so thank you so much for watching. Baruch Atah. Shalom. Please like, subscribe, and share. Like, subscribe, and share. I encourage you to make a donation at livelightwell.com, intoalltruth.net, and in order to obtain a calendar, the Moed appointed times, and Chaya Eat Life and Fast. They enable us to live our lives Hebraically, to line up with the appointments or meetings with our Creator, who pours a message and a word into us and guides us into all truth. And it's by using these types of tools that we can remain faithful to our Elohim's word and enter into the promise. Okay, so it's not just a cookbook, Chaya Eat Life and Fast. It's about a Hebraic lifestyle, fasting, and the divine procession of life and order, and the Hebraic foods and healing, okay, from a Hebraic perspective. And so it helps you to line up with Yah's commands. Shuvah Yahuwah Revot Yasharel. Return, O Yahuwah, to the countless thousands of Israel.
Israel, who love, worship, and praise Yahweh. Give him thanks by saying hallelujah.